There's a moment in Season 4 Stranger Things that most viewers completely missed. A fleeting expression on Will Byers' face that lasted less than 2 seconds. But those 2 seconds might reveal the darkest truth in the entire series. Because what if Will knows? What if he's been aware this entire time that everything since his rescue from the Upside Down has been a carefully constructed illusion? What if the boy who was lost in the darkness never actually came home? It happens during the pizza parlor scene in Season 4. The California crew is laughing, talking, trying to have a normal moment. And Will is there, smiling along with everyone else. But watch his eyes. Really watch them. There's a flicker, a microsecond where his expression changes. Not sadness, not fear, something else entirely. Recognition. The look of someone who's just noticed a glitch in the matrix, a crack in the facade. The Duffer Brothers are meticulous filmmakers. Nothing in Stranger Things happens by accident. Every frame is deliberate. Every performance is crafted. So when Noah Schnapp, who plays Will, delivers that particular expression in that particular moment, it means something. And what it might mean is more terrifying than any monster the show has ever created. Let's go back to the beginning. November 6, 1983. Will Byers vanishes while riding his bike home from a Dungeons & Dragons session at Mike Wheeler's house. He's chased by the Demogorgon, makes it to his house, tries to call for help, and then disappears into the Upside Down. We see glimpses of his week there, hiding, running, singing to himself to stay brave, constructing a makeshift fort in Castle Byers. And then, finally, Joyce and Hopper find him in the upside-down version of the library, unconscious, with a tendril down his throat. They bring him back, rush him to the hospital. He's intubated, sedated, barely alive. But he survives. He recovers. He comes home. And life, slowly, painfully, returns to something resembling normal. Except it doesn't. Not really. Because Will is never the same after the Upside Down. Season 2 shows us why. Will starts having what everyone calls episodes. Visions of the Upside Down bleeding into his reality. The Mind Flayer watching him, possessing him, taking control of his body, and using him as a spy against his friends and family. By the end of Season 2, they've burned the Mind Flayer out of him. He's free. He's safe. He's home for real this time. Or is he? Here's where the theory gets dark. Here's where everything we've watched for 4 seasons starts to unravel. What if Will never left the Upside Down? What if the rescue in Season 1 was the beginning of the illusion, not the end of the nightmare? What if everything that's happened since Joyce and Hopper pulled him from that library has been a meticulously crafted hallucination designed by something far more intelligent and far more malicious than the Demogorgon? Think about how Vecna's power works. We see it clearly in Season 4. He doesn't just kill his victims. He traps them in their own minds first. He shows them their worst memories, their deepest traumas, their darkest fears. He constructs entire realities inside their heads, beautiful and terrible and utterly convincing. And he feeds on their suffering, their guilt, their pain. Max almost dies in Vecna's curse. But she doesn't. Steve, Nancy, they all face him and escape. But they escape because they have anchors, music, memories, love, things that pull them back to reality, things that remind them what's real and what's illusion. But what if you're a 12-year-old boy who spent a week in absolute terror? What if your anchor to reality was already fractured before Vecna ever got his hands on you? What if the perfect illusion for you was a nightmare, but normalcy? The chance to go home, to see your mom, to be with your friends, to live the life that was stolen from you? That's the genius of it. That's the horror that the show has been building toward without explicitly saying it. Vecna doesn't need to torture Will with memories of trauma. Will's entire existence since the Upside Down has been trauma. So instead, Vecna gives him something worse. Hope, the illusion of escape, the belief that he made it out. Look at the evidence. Really look at it. In Season 2, Will's visions of the Upside Down aren't just flashbacks. They're too vivid, too real. He sees the Mind Flayer in the sky, this massive shadowy entity, and no one else can see it. He's pulled into the Upside Down mentally while his body remains in Hawkins. The doctors call it PTSD, psychological trauma manifesting as hallucinations. But what if it's the opposite? What if those visions are Will's mind trying to break through the illusion, trying to show him where he really is? The possession in Season 2 takes this even further. The Mind Flayer infiltrates Will's body, uses him as a spy, makes him forget things, manipulates his perception of reality. And when they finally drive it out of him, they do it with heat. They turn up the temperature until the creature can't stand it anymore and leaves his body. Will screams. He convulses. And then, suddenly he's fine. He's himself again. The monster is gone. But here's the question no one asks. How do we know it actually left? We see black smoke pouring out of Will's mouth. We see it escape through the door. But we only see this from the perspective of the people in the room. From Joyce's perspective. From Hopper's perspective. From a perspective of characters who might themselves be part of Will's constructed reality. What if the exorcism was another layer of the illusion? What if Vecna, controlling Will's mind, simply made him believe he was free? Made everyone around him believe it too? Because that's the thing about a perfect mental prison. You can't break out if you don't know you're in one. Season 3 gives us more clues. Will is the first to sense the Mind Flayer's return. He touches the back of his neck and feels cold. He knows something is wrong before anyone else does. The show frames this as a connection, a residual link from his possession. But what if it's simpler than that? What if we can sense the Mind Flayer because he never left its domain? Because some part of him, the real him, is still trapped in the upside down, still connected to the hive mind, still feeding Vecna information and power? And then there's the move to California. Season 4 begins with the Byers family trying to start fresh. New house, new school, new life, away from Hawkins, away from the trauma. But Will doesn't seem happier. If anything, he seems more isolated, more disconnected. He's painting now, creating art that he won't show anyone. Art that, when we finally see it, depicts the party fighting a great evil together. Art that looks less like imagination and more like memory, or premonition. The painting becomes important later. Will gives it to Mike as a gift, as a way of expressing feelings he can't put into words. But look at what the painting shows. The party, together, facing a massive dragon-like creature. Will holding a fireball. Everyone united against darkness. It's beautiful. It's hopeful. And it might be the last thing Will remembers from reality before the illusion took over completely. Because here's another possibility. What if the painting is Will's subconscious trying to communicate? What if some buried part of him knows he's trapped and is trying to send a message to his real friends in the real world? The painting shows them fighting together. United. Strong. Maybe that's not just wish fulfillment. Maybe it's instruction. Maybe it's Will's true self, locked away in Vecna's mental prison, trying to tell his friends how to save him. The pizza parlor scene happens after the painting reveal. That's when we see that flicker in Will's eyes, that moment of recognition. And here's what makes it so chilling. It happens right after a moment of genuine happiness, right after laughter and friendship and normalcy, as if Will's mind, for just a second, recognized that the happiness felt wrong. Too perfect. Too scripted. In Vecna's illusions, victims see what they want to see until they don't. Until the cracks start showing. Until reality bleeds through. Max sees happier times with Billy until she doesn't. Until the memory corrupts and Billy becomes a monster. Nancy sees a future with Jonathan until she doesn't. Until the dream turns into a nightmare. But Will's illusion is different. It's longer, more sustained, more complex. Because Vecna has had him longer, since 1983. For years of carefully maintained reality. For years of making Will believe he escaped. For years of feeding on his hope, his love for his family and friends, his desperate desire for normalcy. And maybe, just maybe, that illusion is starting to crack. The evidence becomes harder to ignore when you look at Will's relationship with Mike Wheeler. Their friendship has been the emotional core of Stranger Things since the beginning. Mike's desperate search for Will in Season 1, Will's possession, and Mike's refusal to give up on him in Season 2. Their connection, their bond, it's real and powerful and undeniable. But Season 4 does something strange with that dynamic. It changes it, complicates it, and maybe reveals the truth about what Will is experiencing. Will is in love with Mike. The show doesn't say this explicitly, but Noah Schnapp confirmed it in interviews. The painting, the looks, the pain on Will's face when Mike talks about 11. It's all there. Will loves Mike in a way that goes beyond friendship. And that love is beautiful and tragic and completely one-sided. Mike loves 11. Will knows this, and it destroys him. But here's where it gets interesting. Here's where the illusion theory becomes almost undeniable. What if Will's unrequited love for Mike isn't real? What if it's another layer of the trap? Think about what would cause Will the most psychological pain. Not monsters, not physical danger, emotional isolation. Loving someone who can never love you back. Watching your best friend fall in love with someone else while you suffer in silence. That's torture. That's feeding Vecna exactly what he needs. Vecna's victims all share something in common. Guilt, shame, unresolved trauma. Max feels guilty about Billy. Chrissy was tormented by her mother. Fred killed someone in a car accident. Each of them carried a wound that Vecna could exploit. A crack he could widen until it consumed them entirely. So what's Will's wound? What's the trauma that Vecna is exploiting? It could be his time in the Upside Down, the week of terror, the possession. But those are external traumas, things done to him. Vecna's curse works best with internal pain, with secrets, with shame. What if Will's homosexuality, his love for Mike, his inability to express his true self? What if that's the wound Vecna is using? What if the entire illusion is constructed around maximizing that particular pain? Giving Will a normal life, a loving family, close friends, but making sure he can never fully be himself within that life. Making sure there's always distance, always loneliness, always the sense that he doesn't quite belong. That's the perfect prison for someone like Will. Not darkness and monsters. Light and love and family, but always at arm's length, always just out of reach. Always conditional on hiding a fundamental part of who you are. And maybe Will is starting to realize this. Maybe that flicker in the pizza parlor wasn't just about the illusion itself. Maybe it was about recognizing the pattern, the way his life keeps creating situations where he's isolated, where he's the odd one out, where everyone else gets to be happy and whole while he suffers quietly on the sidelines. In Season 4, the party splits up. 11, Mike, Will, Jonathan, and Argyle in California. Dustin, Steve, Robin, Nancy, and Hawkins. Max, Lucas, Erica dealing with Vecna directly. And Will is just there. He has no arc of his own, no monster to fight, no mystery to solve. He's literally been reduced to a supporting character in his own story. The boy who started everything, whose disappearance launched the entire series, has become almost irrelevant to the plot, unless that's intentional, unless his irrelevance is the point. Because in an illusion constructed by Vecna, Will wouldn't be the hero. He'd be exactly what he is in Season 4, a witness, an observer, someone who experiences a story but doesn't drive it, someone who's present but not really there. Think about Will's dialogue in Season 4. Most of it is reactive, responding to others, supporting others' emotional journeys. When he does speak about his own feelings, it's always in code, through the painting, through metaphors about being different. He never gets to be direct, never gets to be fully honest. And maybe that's because the illusion won't let him. Because if Will spoke his truth plainly, if he broke through the constructed narrative and said exactly what he was feeling, the whole thing might collapse. There's a scene in the van where Will talks to Mike about 11. He's ostensibly describing 11's feelings, her love for Mike, her need to be understood. But we know and Will knows that he's really talking about himself. He's projecting his own emotions onto 11 because he can't express them directly. It's heartbreaking. It's beautifully acted. And it might be Will's subconscious screaming to be heard through the only channel available to it. Mike listens. Mike is moved. But Mike doesn't understand. He takes Will's words at face value, applies them to 11, and never realizes his best friend is confessing his love in the only way he knows how. It's a tragedy, a misconnection. And in the context of the illusion theory, it's Vecna's masterpiece. Maximum emotional pain, maximum isolation, maximum feeding potential. But let's talk about the physical evidence, because it's not just emotional and psychological clues. There are concrete, observable details that suggest something is deeply wrong with Will's reality. His neck. Will constantly touches the back of his neck throughout the series. It started in Season 2 during his possession, the Mind Flayer's entry point, the place where the connection was strongest. And even after the exorcism, even after he's supposedly free, Will keeps touching it, feeling for something, checking for something. In Season 3, that's how he knows the Mind Flayer is back. The cold sensation, the awareness. Season 4, he's still doing it, still touching his neck, still feeling for the connection. The show frames this as a scar, a reminder. But what if it's more? What if Will is still connected to the hive mind, still part of Vecna's network, and some part of him knows it? What if every time he touches his neck, he's feeling the tether that keeps him bound to the upside down? Then there are the visions. Will's episodes in Season 2 weren't just random. They followed a pattern. They happened at specific times. When he was stressed, when he was alone, when his guard was down. And what did he see? The upside down, yes, but not the upside down as it was when he was trapped there. An evolved version. A version with the Mind Flayer fully manifested. A version that showed him the future, or the present, or the reality. He was actually living while his mind constructed a false Hawkins around him. Dr. Owens, a government scientist, tried to explain Will's vision scientifically. Post-traumatic stress, the brain processing trauma. But even Owens seemed uncertain. Even he admitted that what Will was experiencing went beyond conventional psychology. And when the possession became undeniable, when Will started speaking in the Mind Flayer's voice and drawing its tunnel system, Owens had no explanation at all, because there is no scientific explanation, not for what Will experienced, not for how deeply the upside down infected him, not for how he could possibly be fine after everything that happened to his mind and body, unless he isn't fine, unless he never was. The tunnels are another clue. When Will was possessed, he drew an elaborate tunnel system, miles of underground passages beneath Hawkins. He drew them compulsively, frantically, covering page after page with intricate detail. The party used those drawings to navigate the tunnels and burn them, to hurt the Mind Flayer, to save Will. But how did Will know about the tunnels? He'd been in the upside down for a week, sure, but he'd been in buildings. Castle Byers, the library. He never went underground. He never saw the tunnel system. So, how could he draw it with such precision? The show's explanation is that the Mind Flayer knew, and therefore Will knew. But that raises another question. If Will had access to the Mind Flayer's knowledge while possessed, what happened to that knowledge after possession ended? Did it just disappear? Or is it still there, locked away in his mind, accessible but hidden? A connection that never really severed? In Season 3, Will senses the Mind Flayer's return before anyone else. Not through research, not through investigation, through feeling, through knowing. He touches his neck and knows. Instantly, certainly. That shouldn't be possible if the connection is truly broken. That should only be possible if some part of Will is still linked to the hive mind, still part of Vecna's network. And if he's still connected, still linked, still part of the system, then everything he's experiencing could be filtered through that connection. Everything could be an illusion constructed by the intelligence on the other end. By Vecna. Season 4 reveals that Vecna has been the architect all along, not the Mind Flayer, not the Demogorgon. Vecna, Henry Creel, one, a human who became a monster, a psychic who discovered the upside down and bent it to his will. And his specialty, his particular gift, is mental manipulation, creating illusions, trapping people in their own minds. He's been doing it for years. Since 1979, when he killed his family and was sent to Hawkins' lab. Since 11 banished him to the upside down, and he became something else. Something powerful. Something capable of reaching across dimensions and planting visions in people's heads. Chrissy's vision started weeks before she died. Fred's too. Max is built over days. Vecna is patient. He doesn't rush. He lets the illusion develop naturally, embedding itself so deeply that his victims don't even know they're trapped until it's too late. So how long has he had Will? Since 1983. That's 4 years by season 4. For years to perfect the illusion. For years to make it seamless. For years to ensure Will never suspects that he's still in the nightmare. Still feeding Vecna power. Still trapped in the darkness. The most damning evidence comes from the inconsistencies. Small things. Details that don't quite add up. The kind of glitches that appear in even the most sophisticated illusions when you know what to look for. And Will, whether he consciously realizes it or not, has been noticing these glitches since season 2. Let's start with Castle Byers. Will built it when he was younger, a fort in the woods behind his house, his private sanctuary. In season 1, when he's trapped in the Upside Down, he hides there. It's a safe place even in that nightmare dimension. In season 2, after the exorcism, Joyce asks him to tell her something only the real Will would know. He talks about Castle Byers, the day they built it, how it rained and they got soaked but kept working. It's a beautiful memory. It proves he's himself again. Except in season 3, Will destroys Castle Byers. He tears it apart in a fit of rage and sadness after a fight with Mike and Lucas about growing up. He rips down the walls, smashes the drawings, demolishes the one place that was entirely his. And then he leaves it there, destroyed, abandoned. Why does this matter? Because Castle Byers exists in the Upside Down. We saw it in season 1. And the Upside Down is frozen. Stuck on the day Will disappeared. November 6, 1983. Nancy discovers this in season 4. When she's trapped there, everything is exactly as it was on that date. Nothing changes. Nothing progresses. It's a snapshot, a frozen moment in time. So if Will destroys Castle Byers in 1985 in the real world, it should still be intact in the Upside Down, still standing as it was in 1983. But we never see it again. We never get confirmation. And that's strange, because Castle Byers is important. It's symbolic. It represents Will's childhood, his innocence, his safe space. The show makes a big deal about its destruction in season 3, but then it's never mentioned again. What if it's because Castle Byers doesn't exist anymore? What if Will destroying it in his perceived reality somehow affected the Upside Down version? What if that's possible because Will never left the Upside Down? Because the reality he destroyed it in and the reality where it originally stood are the same reality, just perceived differently? That's the thing about illusions. They have to maintain internal consistency. If Will's mind is constructing a false Hawkins around his actual location in the Upside Down, then changes he makes in his perceived reality might bleed through to his actual surroundings. Destroying Castle Byers in his mind might manifest as destroying it in truth. The walls between illusion and reality blur when you're trapped in a psychic prison. Then there's the timeline problem. Stranger Things is meticulous about continuity. The Duffer Brothers track dates carefully. Events happen in specific sequences, but Will's timeline has gaps, moments that don't quite line up, periods where his whereabouts or activities aren't fully accounted for. In season 2, during his possession, there are hours Will can't remember. The mind flare takes control and Will loses time. The show presents this as a possession working. But even after the exorcism, even after he's supposedly free, Will still has moments of dissociation, times when he seems distant or disconnected. The show attributes this to trauma, to PTSD. But what if it's the illusion glitching? What if these are moments when Will's consciousness briefly touches reality, and his mind has to quickly reconstruct the false narrative? Season 3 has a particularly suspicious moment. The Byers family is packing to move. Will is in his room, boxing up his things. He picks up a photo of the party from season 2. He looks at it for a long time, and there's something in his expression, not nostalgia, not sadness, confusion, like he's looking at evidence of events he remembers but can't quite believe actually happened. This is the same expression actors have in Vecna's illusions right before they realize something is wrong, right before the perfect memory starts to corrupt. Max gets that look when she's with Billy. Nancy gets it when she's with Jonathan. It's the moment of cognitive dissonance. The moment when the subconscious recognizes that something doesn't fit, that something is fundamentally wrong with what's being perceived. And well, how's that look? Staring at a photograph, questioning his own memories, wondering if the life he's living is real or if he's still lost in the dark. The move to California creates even more problems with the illusion theory. On the surface, it seems like an ending. The Byers leave Hawkins. They start over. They escape the trauma. But look deeper. Look at what the move actually accomplishes for Will's emotional state. It isolates him further. In Hawkins, he had the party. He had Mike, Lucas, Dustin. He had people who understood what he'd been through because they'd been through it with him. In California, he has no one. Jonathan is too focused on his own problems. Joyce is busy with Hopper. 11 is dealing with her own trauma. Will is more alone in California than he ever was in Hawkins. And alone is exactly where Vecna wants his victims. Isolated, cut off from support systems, trapped in their own heads with their pain and guilt and shame. Every one of Vecna's victims in Season 4 was alone when he took them. Chrissy, Fred, Patrick, Max, all isolated, all separated from people who might anchor them to reality. So moving to California, away from a support system, away from the people who know him best, is exactly what Vecna would do. It's exactly how you deepen an illusion. You remove variables. You control the environment. You limit the number of people who might notice inconsistencies or ask difficult questions. And California is where Will starts to crack, where the pain becomes too much, where his unrequited love for Mike reaches a breaking point, where he creates the painting, that desperate attempt to communicate something true in a world that feels increasingly false. The painting itself is suspicious. Will is a good artist, but the painting is elaborate, detailed, professional, almost too good for a high school student working in his bedroom. It shows the party in a style that resembles upside-down artwork. Dark, atmospheric, tinged with elements that don't quite belong in a simple D&D tribute. Look at the monster they're fighting in the painting. It's not the Demogorgon. It's not the Mind Flayer. It's something else. Something new. A massive shadow with wings. And this is before the party knows about Vecna. Before they understand what they're really fighting. So how does Will know to paint it? How does his subconscious know what's coming? Because he's connected. Because some part of him is still in the hive mind. Still receiving information. Still linked to Vecna's consciousness. And that link lets him see the truth. Lets him perceive the real threat. Even if he doesn't consciously understand what he's drawing. The painting is prophecy. It's warning. It's Will's true self trying to break through the illusion and tell his friends what's really happening. That they're fighting something ancient and powerful. That they need to be united. That Will himself is trapped and needs to be saved. But no one sees it that way. Mike sees it as a gift. 11 sees it as a tribute. No one recognizes it for what it really is. A cry for help from someone who's been screaming in silence for 4 years. Then there's the van confession. The scene where Will talks to Mike about feeling different. About being a mistake. About finding 11 in the party and finally feeling like he belonged. It's devastating. It's honest. And it's the closest Will has ever come to breaking through the narrative he's trapped in. He's not talking about 11. Everyone knows this. He's talking about himself. His sexuality. His love for Mike. His desperate need to be seen and understood and accepted. But he has to code it. Has to project it onto someone else. Because in the illusion Vecna has constructed, Will can never speak his truth directly. The narrative won't allow it. The programming won't permit it. So he speaks in metaphors, in allegories. He tells Mike the truth while pretending it's someone else's truth. And Mike listens, and Mike cares, and Mike completely misses what his best friend is really saying. Because that's how the illusion works. It keeps people close enough to hurt Will, but far enough to never truly help him. It gives him love, but never lets him have it fully. It's torture disguised as normalcy. And the worst part? Will knows, on some level, he knows this isn't right. Knows the pattern is too perfect. Knows the pain is too precisely calibrated. That flicker in his eyes at the pizza parlor. That moment of recognition. That's Will's consciousness briefly touching reality. Briefly seeing the pattern. briefly understanding that he's not in California at all, that he's still in the Upside Down, still in the library, still with a tendril down his throat, still dying slowly while Vecna feeds on his suffering. But the moment passes, the illusion reasserts itself, and Will goes back to believing he's real, that his life is real, that his pain has meaning beyond feeding a monster. The final battle of Season 4 should have been Will's moment, the moment when the boy who started everything finally became central to the story again, the moment when his connection to the Upside Down, to Vecna, to the Mind Flayer, became the key to victory. But instead, Will stands on the sidelines. He watches. He supports. He's there, but he's not there. And maybe that's the most telling detail of all. When 11 fights Vecna in Max's mind, Will feels it. He touches his neck. He knows something is happening, but he doesn't understand what. He's connected enough to sense the disturbance, but disconnected enough to be useless. It's the worst of both worlds. Still linked to the nightmare, but unable to act on that link. Unable to help. Unable to matter. This is consistent with the illusion theory. If Will is trapped in Vecna's constructed reality, he wouldn't have full access to his connection. He'd have just enough awareness to suffer, just enough knowledge to feel helpless, but not enough power to break free. That's how you keep someone imprisoned. You give them glimpses of the truth. You let them feel the bars of their cage. But you never give them the key. 11 defeats Vecna. Max dies but is brought back by 11's power. The rifts open. Hawkins starts to collapse into the Upside Down. And through all of this, Will stands watching, feeling, knowing that something is deeply wrong, but unable to articulate what, unable to act. The final scene of Season 4 is perhaps the most important. The party is reunited. They're standing on a hill overlooking Hawkins as ash falls from the sky, and the Upside Down bleeds into their world. And Will touches his neck. He feels the cold, and he says, "He's not gone. I can still feel him." Everyone assumes he's talking about Vecna, about the Mind Flayer, about the ongoing threat. But listen to how he says it. The tone, the certainty, the resignation. He's not warning them about an external threat. He's confessing an internal truth. He's saying, "I'm still connected. I never stop being connected. Whatever you think you defeated, it's still here, still in me, still feeding." And then he looks at the red lightning in the sky, the rifts tearing Hawkins apart. And there's that expression again, that flicker, that moment of recognition. Like he's seeing something everyone else is missing. Like he's understanding something terrible and profound. What if what Will is recognizing is that none of this is real? That Hawkins didn't fall to the Upside Down. That Vecna wasn't defeated. That this entire scenario, this apocalyptic ending to Season 4, is just another layer of the illusion? Another nightmare scenario that Vecna is feeding into his consciousness? Think about it. Why would the Upside Down suddenly start bleeding into Hawkins now? Why would the barriers break down after all this time? 11 has closed gates before. She did it in Season 2. The Mind Flayer was pushed back. The Upside Down was sealed away. So why can't she do it now? Why is Vecna's damage permanent when nothing else has been? Unless it's not. Unless the apocalyptic ending is what Will expect to happen. What his trauma tells him should happen. The world ending because a monster won. Everything collapsing because evil triumphed. That's Will's deepest fear. That's what his mind would construct if it was trying to make sense of being trapped. A logical explanation for why escape is impossible. The world has already ended. There's nowhere to escape to. Vecna's illusions are based on victim psychology. He shows them what they fear, what they expect, what their guilt and trauma tell them they deserve. Max sees herself causing Billy's death over and over. Nancy sees her family dead. Fred sees a boy he killed in the accident. Each vision is personalized, customized, perfectly calibrated to maximize suffering. So what would Vecna show Will? A boy who's been through hell, who's been possessed, who's been used as a weapon against his friends, who carries guilt about the pain he's caused even though none of it was his fault. What vision would break someone like that? Not monsters in the dark. Will's lived through that. Not possession. He survived that too. No, the perfect nightmare for Will is hope followed by failure. rescue followed by relapse, the illusion of escape followed by the revelation that you never left. You just thought you did. You just believed you were free, while the whole time you were still trapped, still suffering, still feeding the monster. That's what Season 4's ending might represent. Not reality, not an actual invasion, but Will's mind finally breaking under the weight of the illusion, finally recognizing that something is wrong. And Vecna, sensing this recognition, escalating the scenario, making the stakes higher, making the threat more obvious, making sure Will stays engaged with the false narrative even as the subconscious screams that none of it makes sense. Because here's what doesn't make sense. Vecna's plan. He opens 4 gates. He creates 4 rifts. And then what? He waits. He doesn't immediately invade. He doesn't press his advantage. For someone who's been planning this for years, who's been systematically eliminating obstacles and gathering power, his endgame is strangely passive. He tears open the barriers between worlds and then nothing. He just lets everyone regroup, lets them prepare, lets them plan a counterattack. That's not how villains work. That's not how Vecna has worked throughout the season. He's been ruthless, efficient, brutal. He doesn't give people chances to recover. He doesn't wait. So why is he waiting now? Unless he's not. Unless the waiting is just how Will's mind interprets the ongoing feeding process. Time in an illusion doesn't work like time in reality. Vecna could be feeding on Will for minutes in the real world, while Will experiences weeks or months in a constructed timeline. The gaps between seasons, the downtime, the periods quiet, those might all be compression. The illusion's way of skipping ahead to the parts that generate the most emotional energy. Season 5 hasn't aired yet. We don't know how the story ends. But if this theory is correct, if Will has been trapped in Vecna's illusion since Season 1, then Season 5 has to be about his awakening, his realization, his escape, or his final consumption. One or the other. The Duffer Brothers have said that Season 5 will bring everything full circle. Back to the beginning. Back to Will, the boy who vanished. The boy who started it all. What if back to Will means back to that library in the Upside Down? Back to the moment of rescue. That was actually the moment of capture? Back to the truth that's been hidden under 4 seasons of carefully constructed false reality? What if the final season shows us Will waking up? Actually waking up. Not from sleep. From the illusion. From 4 years of nightmare disguised as life. What if we see him still in that library? Still with a tendril down his throat. Still dying slowly while his mind lived an entire false existence. And what if he's not alone? What if the others are there too? Max, who died but was brought back. Who's in a coma. Who's not really conscious. What if she's an illusion with Will? What if Vecna has been collecting them? Building his perfect feeding ground? One victim at a time. One consciousness at a time. Until he has enough power to break through completely, that would explain Max's condition at the end of Season 4. Alive but not alive. Breathing but not conscious. Her mind is somewhere else. Somewhere Vecna has her. And maybe that somewhere is the same place Will has been. The same constructed reality. The same shared nightmare. If you think about Stranger Things as a whole, it's a story about perception versus reality. About how we see the world versus how it actually is. The Upside Down is literally a dark reflection of Hawkins, a twisted version of the familiar. And throughout the series, characters have struggled with distinguishing what's real from what's not. Nancy with her guilt, Steve with his self-worth, Joyce with her belief that Will was alive when everyone said he wasn't. But the most consistent struggle with reality has been Will's. Since Season 1, since the moment he vanished. His entire arc has been about trying to feel normal, trying to belong, try to convince himself and everyone else that he's okay, that he made it out, that he survived. But what if he didn't? What if his entire journey has been about maintaining an illusion, not for Vecna's benefit, for his own, because the truth is too terrible to accept, because knowing you're trapped is worse than believing you're free. There's a psychological concept called dissociation. It's what happens when trauma is so severe that the mind fractures, creates distance between consciousness and experience. It's a survival mechanism, the mind protecting itself from pain it can't process. And it's exactly what would happen to a 12-year-old boy trapped in a nightmare dimension for a week, hunted by monsters, alone, terrified, convinced he's going to die. Dissociation could explain everything about Will's experience. The visions, the possession, the ongoing sense of disconnection from his own life. All of it could be his mind fragmenting under impossible stress, creating layers of reality to cope with trauma too big to integrate. And if Vecna is as powerful as Season 4 suggests, if he can manipulate minds and create convincing illusions, then he could use Will's dissociation against him, could build entire worlds inside those fractured pieces, could trap Will in his own coping mechanism. That's the true horror of the theory. Not that Will is trapped in a random illusion, but that he's trapped in an illusion built from his own psychology, from his own mind's attempt to protect itself. Vecna didn't create the structure. Will did. Vecna just moved in, made himself at home, started feeding on the very mechanisms Will created to survive. The painting makes even more sense in this context. Art therapy is a real treatment for trauma and dissociation. It helps people externalize internal experiences, put images to feelings they can't articulate, and Will paints. Constantly. Throughout the series, we see him drawing, creating, expressing himself through art, because he can't do it through words, because the dissociation won't let him speak directly about what he's experiencing. So the painting of the party fighting the dragon isn't just symbolic, it's diagnostic. It's Will's fractured consciousness trying to show him the truth. You're not in California. You're not at school. You're not having normal teenage problems. You're in a battle. You're fighting for your life. You're trapped in something ancient and evil, and you need help. Wake up. Please wake up. But he can't wake up. Because waking up means facing the truth. Means accepting that he never escaped. That Joyce didn't save him. That Hopper didn't pull him out of the upside down. That everything he's lived for 4 years has been a lie. And that truth is too devastating. Too world-ending. So his mind rejects it. Stays an illusion. Stays comfortable in the false reality, even as it causes him constant pain. This is why Will's suffering is so specific, so focused on emotional isolation rather than physical danger. Because emotional pain is what feeds dissociation, what keeps the fragmented psyche from reintegrating. Physical threats would force integration, would require the mind to come together to survive. But emotional pain, loneliness, unrequited love, feeling like an outsider in your own life, that keeps you fractured, keeps you trapped in your own head, keeps you feeding the monster that's made a home in your consciousness. Vecna understands this. He's been in mines. He knows how they break, how they cope, how they can be manipulated. He chose Will specifically because Will's mind was already primed for this kind of trap, already dissociative, already struggling with reality. 1 week in the upside down created the perfect foundation. Vecna just had to build on it. Had to make the illusion convincing enough that Will would choose to stay in it rather than face the truth. And it worked. For 4 years, it worked perfectly. Will lived a whole life, went to school, spent time with friends, moved across the country, fell in love, suffered heartbreak, experienced joy and pain, and everything in between. All of it real to him. All of it meaningful. All of it feeding Vecna's power, while Will remain completely unaware. But Season 4 changed something. The cracks are showing. The glitches are becoming more frequent. Will is touching his neck more, having more moments of dissociation, looking more confused, more lost, more aware that something fundamental is wrong with his existence. The illusion is breaking down, and that could mean one of two things. Either Will is finally waking up, finally breaking through, finally on the verge of seeing the truth and escaping. Or Vecna is finished with him, has fed enough, has gotten all the power he needs from Will's suffering. And now the illusion is collapsing because Vecna is preparing to consume Will completely. To finish what he started in that library in 1983. To finally kill the boy who's been dying in slow motion for 4 years. Season 5 will tell us which, but there are clues already. Small hints about which direction the story is heading. And most of them point toward the darker possibility, toward consumption rather than escape. The biggest clue is Will's decreasing relevance to plot. Each season, he matters less, has less agency, less impact on events. In Season 1, he was the entire driving force. Find Will, save Will, everything revolved around him. Season 2, he was a possessed victim, still central but more passive. Season 3, he was a canary in the coal mine, sensing danger but not fighting it. Season 4, he was barely there, a supporting character, an observer. This progression makes sense if Will is being consumed, if Vecna is slowly draining him. Each season, Will has less life force, less presence, less connection to reality. He's fading, becoming a ghost in his own story. By Season 5, there might be nothing left, just a shell, a husk, a boy-shaped space where Will Byers used to be. The neck touching supports this too. Will isn't checking for a connection. He's checking for himself, making sure he's still real, still present, still alive. And each time he touches his neck, each time he feels that cold spot, he's feeling his own dissolution, the place where Vecna's consciousness meets his, the boundary between self and other. And that boundary is getting thinner. The cold is spreading. Soon it won't just be a spot on his neck. It'll be everywhere. It'll be all of him. And then there won't be a Will anymore. Just Vecna wearing his skin. This is what Max might have seen if she looked at Will with Vecna's curse active. Not the Will everyone else sees. The quiet, artistic, sensitive boy trying to navigate life. But the truth, a hollow shell, a puppet, a victim who died years ago but whose body keeps moving because something else is piloting it. Something dark, something hungry, something that's been feeding on Will's life force while wearing his face. If this seems too dark for Stranger Things, remember that this is a show that killed Bob Newby in Season 2, that killed Billy Hargrove in Season 3, that killed Eddie Munson in Season 4, that put Max in a coma with broken limbs and blindness. The Duffer Brothers aren't afraid of darkness. They're not afraid of tragedy. And they've been building towards something with Will since the beginning. Something bigger than another possession. Something more permanent than another rescue. What if the end game is sacrifice? What if Will's arc has always been leading toward a moment where he has to choose between staying in a comfortable illusion or waking up to reality where he's been dead for years, where his body is just meat, where his consciousness is just energy feeding a monster, where there's no real escape possible, just acceptance of what he's become? That's a tragedy. That's devastating. But it's also thematically consistent with everything the show has explored. Grief, loss, the cost of fighting monsters. The idea that sometimes the people we love don't come back. Not really. Not whole. Sometimes they're changed too much, damaged too deeply. And the kindest thing we can do is let them go. Joyce would never accept this. She fought too hard to get Will back. Spent too much of her life refusing to give up on him. But what if Season 5 is about Joyce learning to let go? Learning that her son died in 1983, and what came back was something else? Something wearing his face, but not him. Not anymore. Not for a long time. That would break her. It would break all of them. But it would also complete the story. The boy who vanished, who was searched for, who was found, who was lost again in a way no one understood, who finally, in the end, was released. Set free, not rescued. Released. Allowed to stop fighting. Allowed to stop pretending. Allowed to die the death he should have died years ago. But maybe there's another possibility. Maybe the story doesn't end in tragedy. Maybe Will's awareness, his growing recognition of the illusion, is actually the key to destroying Vecna. Maybe the fact that he knows, that he's starting to see through constructed reality, gives him power, makes him dangerous, turns him from victim into weapon. This is what the painting might really represent. Not a cry for help, not prophecy, but strategy. Will's subconscious understanding that the only way to defeat Vecna is from inside, that someone needs to be in the illusion, aware of the illusion, and strong enough to break it from within. And Will is that someone, the boy who's been trapped longest, who survived the nightmare, who's built up resistance through sheer endurance. 11 is powerful. She can fight Vecna in the physical realm, can match his telekinetic abilities, can hold him off, but she can't defeat him permanently because she's fighting the symptom, not the disease. Vecna's real power isn't his body in the upside down. It's his mind, his ability to trap people in illusions, to feed on their suffering, to grow stronger with each victim he consumes. You can't punch your way through that. You can't blast it with psychic energy. You have to beat him at his own game. You have to enter the illusion and break it. And only Will can do that because only Will has been in Vecna's illusion long enough to understand how it works, to see its patterns, to recognize its glitches. He's been studying it unknowingly for 4 years, learning its rules, finding its weaknesses, building up immunity to its effects. By season 5, he might be ready, might be strong enough to go deeper instead of waking up, to dive into the core of Vecna's consciousness and destroy it from within. This would explain his passivity in season 4. He wasn't sidelined because he's irrelevant. He was being prepared. Trained by the longest exposure to Vecna's power of anyone alive. While everyone else fought the external threat, Will was fighting the internal one, learning the real battlefield, getting ready for the final confrontation. The neck touching would be different in this interpretation too. Not checking for dissolution, checking for the connection, making sure it's still there. Because that connection, that link to Vecna's consciousness, is Will's weapon, his way in, his path to the monster's heart. He's been maintaining it, nurturing it, keeping it alive even though it hurts, even though it isolates him, because he knows on some level that he's going to need it. And the unrequited love for Mike, the pain of being different, the isolation, all of it could be Will consciously or unconsciously building emotional strength, teaching himself to endure suffering, to function despite pain, to stay coherent and focused even when everything in him wants to break down, because that's what he'll need in the final battle. Not power, not abilities, just endurance, the capacity to suffer without losing himself, to stay Will Byers even in the heart of the nightmare. This reading makes Will the true hero of Stranger Things, not 11 with her obvious power, not Steve with his growth from bully to protector, not Hopper with his sacrifice, but Will, the quiet one, the artist, the boy who was taken first and has been fighting longest, the one who never got to be loud about his struggle because his battlefield was internal, invisible, psychological rather than physical. Season 5 could vindicate everything he's been through, could show that the pain had purpose, that the isolation was preparation, that the years of suffering were building toward a moment where only he could save everyone, where his specific trauma, his specific experience, becomes a key to defeating ultimate evil. Imagine the final scene. 11 fighting Vecna's body in the upside down, the rest of the party fighting the monsters in Hawkins, and Will, quiet Will, sitting somewhere still and silent, eyes closed, neck cold, diving deep into the illusion, going to the place where Vecna lives, to the core of his consciousness, to the source of all the false realities and trapped victims. And there, in that dark space, Will finds all of them, Chrissy and Fred and Patrick, Max, maybe even others we haven't seen. People Vecna's been feeding on for years, decades, all trapped in their own personalized nightmares, all suffering, all feeding the monster, and Will shows them the truth. One by one, breaks the illusion for each of them, frees them from their prisons, not with power, not with violence, but with understanding, with empathy, with the hard-won knowledge that comes from surviving the same trap. He tells them, I know it feels real. I know you want to believe. I know waking up is terrifying, but you have to. We all have to. Together, right now. And they wake up, all of them, simultaneously. A mass awakening that drains Vecna's power instantly, because his strength comes from feeding, from trapped minds generating emotional energy. When the minds escape, when the victims become aware, the food supply cuts off. Vecna weakens, starves, becomes vulnerable. And that's when 11 strikes, not against a godlike entity at full power, but against a weakened monster, a predator without prey, a mind without victims to feed on. She doesn't just fight him, she ends him permanently. Because Will created the opening. Will gave her the chance. Will, the first victim, became the key to everyone's freedom. That's the hopeful version. The version where awareness isn't just recognition of the trap, but the tool to escape it. Where Will's journey through hell had meaning. Where his suffering wasn't wasted, but transformed into salvation. For himself. For Max. For everyone Vecna is touched. But here's the thing about Stranger Things. Here's what makes it resonate. It doesn't always choose hope. Sometimes it chooses truth. And the truth is complicated. Messy. Sometimes people don't get saved. Sometimes the damage is too deep. Sometimes awareness of the prison doesn't mean escape is possible. Sometimes you just see your cage more clearly. Which version will we get in Season 5? Will the boy who knows the ending is fake get to rewrite it? Or will he be forced to live it? Will his awareness save him or damn him? Will he break free or break completely? We don't know yet, but the evidence is there. The patterns are visible. Will Byers has been trapped in Vecna's illusion since 1983. He's been slowly realizing this truth since Season 2. And by Season 5, the recognition will be complete. The question isn't whether Will knows he's trapped. He does. The question is what he'll do with that knowledge. Fight, surrender, sacrifice, transform. Any of these are possible. All of them are consistent with the story we've been watching. And that's what makes this theory so compelling. It doesn't require new information, doesn't demand plot twists, just asks us to look at what we've already seen with different eyes, to recognize the pattern that's been there all along. Will Byers standing in the upside-down library, tendril down his throat, dying slowly, while his mind constructs an elaborate reality where he escaped, where he lived, where he loved and hurt and hoped, where he experienced 4 more years of life that his body never got to have, where he became aware of the illusion, but stayed in it anyway. Because what else is there? Where else can he go? How do you escape from inside your own dying mind? You can't. You just live in it, aware, suffering, hoping that somehow awareness itself will be enough, that seeing the pattern will break it, that knowing the ending is fake will let you write a real one. But patterns don't break easily. Minds don't heal themselves. And monsters like Vecna don't let go of prey that's been feeding them for years. Not without a fight. Not without a price. Not without someone being willing to pay it. Will Byers has been paying that price since he was 12 years old. Since the night he rode his bike home and never made it. Since the moment he saw the Demogorgon and ran. Since he disappeared into darkness that's been wearing his life like a mask ever since. The only question left is whether the payment is enough. Whether the cost he's paid has bought him freedom or just awareness of his chains. Whether Season 5 will show us a rescue or a revelation. Whether the boy who started everything will end it too. Or whether he'll just keep standing there, touching his neck, feeling the cold, knowing the truth, and living in the illusion anyway, because it's all he has left. If this theory resonates with you, if you see the patterns I'm seeing, share your thoughts below. What details have you noticed? What evidence supports or contradicts this idea? And if you want to go deeper into Stranger Things theories and hidden meanings, subscribe, because there's more to uncover, more patterns to recognize, more truths hiding in plain sight. The ending might be fake, but the search for truth is real. See you in the next one.